Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is none other than the legendary Wayne Carl. He runs Demolition Fight Series, and they recently just had Demolition Fight Series 12. It was on the November 25th date at Club Italia in Sunshine, Melbourne, Victoria. It's a Pro-Am show. There's a couple of professional fights, a couple of amateur fights. If you haven't seen the card or you don't know who's on the card, if you have no idea what a Demolition Fight show is, I explain it like it's like the college basketball to the NBA that might be Eternal and Hex and whatnot, where they're all pro shows or mostly pro shows, and it's sort of like a really good feeder into it. And Wayne goes in to talk about that, about his vision of Demolition and why he likes it like that. But look, he always has a couple of pro fights and stellar amateurs. We talk about title belts in amateurs. Are they necessary? Should you have them? Do they mean anything? We also talk about why Wayne Carl got into promoting to begin with, where Demolition Fight Series actually came from. It's a very, very unique chat. I've covered Demolition Fight Series before. If you haven't seen it, I believe hit up Fight TV to find out more, and you can check it out. But Fight Series 12, or hit them up on the socials. If you don't know the card or any of these fighters, what I normally do when I listen to these podcasts, just Google the person's name. Like I said, or jump on the Demolition Fight Series, but Google the person's name and Tapology. You can at least see their record and who they fought and whatnot. But we dive into some nice topics, into how he got started and some early stages of MMA. He's also even started a lot of the Australian MMA media that I first became aware of before I even started this. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the man behind Demolition Fight Series, it's none other than Wayne Carl. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me on the show, very special guest, the one and only Wayne Carl. Welcome.
Thank you, mate. Good to finally be on your podcast.
I would say the original Australian MMA.
From a very long time ago, but mate, that name is all yours.
Now, for everyone that doesn't know, you run one of the smoothest shows outside of Eternal and Hex. Demolition is just, you know what you're going to get every single time. It's a family-run event, as the great Callum Potter says, and it has been an absolute breeding ground for talent. One of the biggest names right now, Harry Webb, it's 7-0 as an amateur, I believe. Now he's 3-0 as a pro. You're a man that does, you have amateur titles. You give guys that are either debutants or, first couple of fights in, you give them that professional feel, that professional sort of what they can expect heading into the scene. Is that what you envisioned with starting Demolition?
Yeah, it was always about being pro-am, like mainly amateur, but making sure that at the top of the card we have 2 or 3 pro fights. It's been hard of late, obviously with a lot of pullouts, but at Demolition 12 we're able to have a couple of pro fights, and we'll continue that. But we've always started the card with debutants, finished the amateur part with 3 or 4 titles, and then tried to finish with pro. So that's pretty much our business plan.
And when starting it, what was the goal from the beginning? Like, did you watch other promotions? Did you train yourself? Were you a coach? Like, what made you get involved?
I started in MMA, obviously watching a lot of it. I used to box and kickbox a little bit. I was no good, let's be honest. But I actually jumped on a page called MMA Freaks, and all of a sudden I was an admin overnight, and got to meet a lot of crazy Americans. So shout out to those guys. And then I've become friends with somebody named Wombat Jones that actually purchased XFC a few years ago. And I actually went up there and helped run back of house. That's where myself and Lisa cut our teeth in helping run a promotion. Our first promotion was actually XFC Demolition. So we're actually part of XFC. After that first show, COVID hit, and myself and Lisa decided to branch out on our own, and that's where Demolition Fight Series started. So originally we were part of XFC.
Wow. So Demolition has felt like a brand. I mean, I know it's only Demolition 12, I believe, but like it's felt like a brand that's been around for many years. But so you only started around the COVID times.
2019 was our first show, and then just as we were about to do Demolition 2, COVID struck. So that wiped out a whole year. And then early 2021. We did Demolition 2, and Dan Andrews in Victoria called a 3-day snap lockdown. And we were the first promotion in Australia to do a show without a crowd. So the government rang and said, look, Wayne, you can go ahead because I did have pros on the card. You can go ahead, but you have to refund every ticket. I actually didn't want to do that, but we needed to rebrand. And my wife looked at me. And if anyone knows my wife, they know she's the most loyal person they'll ever meet. She looked at me and she said, I don't care about the money. We need to rebrand. And these fighters have flown in. It's really important that we go ahead. So we actually did Demolition 2 with no crowd.
So how much money did you lose?
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Would you say, looking back now in terms of the rebrand, that it was worth it?
100%. The relationships I've created from that, and the man that's on your t-shirt hadn't fought for 2 years. And I know Harry very well. One of the comments he said to me was, I reckon if shows had a keep, because he actually didn't debut at Demolition, which he had six fights with us. But he actually debuted on another promotion a lot earlier, and I was actually in the crowd doing media, funnily enough, for Combat Insiders. So that's pretty much where I met Harry. He signed a fight on our card. It got delayed so many times. And he actually said, he goes, if it kept happening, could that be, retirement and things like that? So guys like him, there was a lot of other people on that card that are still fighting today. And you look back on it, Val Sharapov, Sem was on it as well. So that was Sem versus, so that was Val versus Sem. Kikembo was on that card as well.
If you take yourself back to the first Demolition show to now,
yep.
What did that show look like compared to now? And what was like one of the biggest lessons you learned?
It was completely different. It felt like chaos. Now it just feels like controlled chaos. It doesn't matter how many that you actually do. Like, obviously, I was involved with 5 or 6 XFC shows behind the scenes. So every show there's surprises, and I go in with an open mind. What I've stopped doing is searching for perfection. Whether it be the walkout, whether it be the crowd, whether it be the fights, whether it be the camera work, you're never going to be perfect. So I've really stepped back and said, you know what, just enjoy it. And what will be, will be. What will be, will be.
What's some of the biggest things that people wouldn't understand that do go wrong in fight shows?
Music walkouts. I've had people stand on the stage and go, well, that's not my walkout, and then walk off. So you've quickly got to find their walkout because the walkout person, that's actually happened a few times. Just this show, I don't know if you've watched it, but a couple of people forgot their groin protectors and had to sprint
I did
upstairs.
see that. Yeah, I did see that.
Yes, one of the titleists, I won't give it away. Might have a brother that's about to debut, but shout out to him if he's watching.
Yeah, mate. And I mean, you talked about the titleists as well. What made, and look, it's garnered some comments from the outside. I personally love it, but the amateur titles.
Let's
I do.
You love to ask this question. It's fine.
I do. What is your thoughts? Obviously, you're the man that does it, but in terms of the amateur titles, and you have to admit there are a few fighters out there, which I think rightfully so in the amateur level. But amateur has almost become, oh yeah, I can be a champion and act like a champion and get sponsors and all that sort of stuff. Do you like seeing that? Or did you always just want amateurs to like, no, this is where you cut your teeth, make your mistakes before you get ready for pro?
100%. It's all about the evolution of amateur. So you start off, and the way that I'd love for it to be is you have 6 amateur fights, maybe win 1 or 2 titles, and then move on to pro. I reckon there's some fairly good up-and-comers in Australia, and I'll name 2 of them, Jonathan Micallef and Harry Webb, that held demolition titles. Luke Daly also held them. Troy Fumo also held them. So if you go through all the pros coming through from Victoria, most of them held a demolition belt. So that doesn't mean I helped in any way, but I actually like the progression. You have 3 or 4 fights. You have a demolition belt, and then you go on to pro. And guess what? If they don't turn pro, but they've got a shiny belt in their lounge room, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I mean, I would take that one step further and say that you have actually helped with those careers because you've helped them sort of learn in their development. And I think the Harry Webb, I mean, it doesn't help that like the man's a gift from God, but like the evolution that he's
Can you
had.
please not say that? He'll be watching this. And shout out to Harry, your head's big enough, but we don't need Mitch pumping your tires up anymore.
Mate, I thought I was like, surely he doesn't have it all. But then I saw he had to weigh in with a towel once, and I was like, damn it, he does. But look, he's done the absolute evolution of like that you can plan out your pro career through the amateurs. And I think it has made, you mentioned John O'Micallef as well, like it's done a great job. And I think it's actually elevated amateurs to, I mean, who do we send to the Olympics for boxing? Amateurs. And I think
Yeah,
amateur MMA can head to that point. It's not it 5 years ago, it looked like the Brendan Favola, Tony the Tradie fight. Like that's what amateur MMA looked like. But now the show you're putting on, man, those guys are fighting like pros.
Yeah, if you watch the last card, you get through, up to, and I'll name it, Sam Matheson's fight versus Orson McComish.
Oh,
Watch that fight and tell me that doesn't look like a pro fight. And that was Sam Matheson's debut. And the reason that we put Sam Matheson up against a 2-1 purple belt, and
yeah.
he's a debut white belt. When people ask me why we did that fight, you want to know why we did that fight? Because if Sam Matheson's training at Infinite MMA, I had every confidence that that fight was going to be a cracker. And I actually jumped on commentary. Don't listen to it because as a promoter, yeah, I'm a lot better promoter than I am commentator. But that's why we did it. So
I mean, I did see that fight. I mean, Demolition Fight Series 12, check it out. It is great. Like you said, from start to finish, it's very impressive. And you mentioned the Sam Matheson fight. I mean, he took on is McCormick was he on 4 days notice and is he 18 years old?
7 days notice, was in the training camp. I reached out to Renato from MMAFFT and he said, hey, I've got someone for you. Always game, they're always training. He's got a huge team, so shout out to that team for filling it. I went to Infinite and said, hey, the only one that's really going to take this is a 2-1 purple belt. And they come back with, yeah, we'll do it. And I was like, okay. And if you watch the fight early, he went through some battles early and then come back and got the TKO early in the third.
Yeah, it was really high caliber. And when you say it's an amateur show or a pro am show or a pro show, I think some people maybe outside the sport, maybe inside the sport think, hey, no, you shouldn't have titles or you shouldn't charge X amount or it shouldn't be this or it shouldn't be that. But when you actually just take the fights for what they are, you do get lost in going, no, these are like two very skilled fighters. Like you said, purple belts. I think was it Storis that was had like 5 kickboxing fights and all that sort
Yeah,
of
so
stuff
Daniel
before him.
Storis out of Primal, he's training with the Fisher brothers. So once again, high caliber gym. It was his debut. He was 5-0, and he took on someone that is just as good. That was a great fight to watch as well. James Filipovic out of Adrenaline. So we gave him a really tough fighter. Watch that one too, and you go through the whole card. And I'm not going to name every fight. But from the start to finish, what Josh Warner does with the matchmaking, I like to look at, yes, it's a pro-am show, but it's ran professionally. And whether or not people want to worry about amateur belts and things like that, I don't get caught up into it because I'm the one paying for them. It's funny, everyone says they don't care about an amateur belt until I wrap it around them.
Well, I mean, and like we said, the guys that are, you look at a Mikolev, you look at a Webb, you're going to look back and you go, how did you become that? Because you have to study the history, right? And they're going to realize, like, oh, if you treat your amateur career, you dress for the job you want, not the one you have. And if you treat your amateur career like a professional career, I think that's where you start to see stuff like that. I mean, even there's some of the fights. I think it was Owen Coughlin. Like, was he not an Olympian or a Commonwealth Games? He was like, he's of that level in terms of judo, isn't he?
Yep. So he was 2-2, and on paper you look at it and go, okay, 2-2 middleweight, 31 amateur. Yeah, it took a late notice 2 weeks, and he was actually sick a couple of days before that. So that performance was outstanding. So shout out to Resilience for taking that fight. Yeah, he's 3-2, and he's only fought the very best. Like He lost to Alfred Stoddard. Now,
Yeah.
both we've both got a good relationship with Alfred because he both is sliding into our DMs regularly. So shout out to Alfred. He'll watch this. But Owen lost to Alfred, so he's only lost to the best middleweights. Owen could turn pro tomorrow.
Yeah.
Jet Fisher could turn pro tomorrow. Jacob Lepage wasn't on this card, but he's only fought at Demolition. He's got a belt. He's ready to turn pro. Dylan Lahare fought everywhere,
Yeah.
has fought for me twice, and I've given him 2 belts. I've just named 5 or 6 of the best fighters coming through that started or has fought on Demolition. Now, I can't take credit. There's other promotions out there doing exactly the same thing that I am. So I'd really like to take that stigma off amateur or pro-am and just look at it for what it is. Because you know what? You go out and it can be, some promotions, just as good as any other promotion in Australia.
I like to I sum it up to people almost like it's college basketball. Like it's in a way sometimes a different sport, but because you know you got your 3 3s and you have to go at it a different way. But you're building superstars, and not just you, but amateur fights in general. But you can't be too humble, man. You're leading the way. Like you, and as shout out to, I mean, you mentioned XFC, they're doing a great job as well. But I truly do think, and I'm not just saying this because I like to classify you as a friend of mine, but like I think you are the best at creating amateurs in this country.
I like to support the gyms, so all I'm doing is giving them a platform. You know, I'd hate to take the shine off a John Campbell or, you know, a Sammy Haywood. They're doing the hard work. I'm putting on 4 events a year, and I keep it simple. A great mentor of mine, Brian Ebersol, back in the day once said, put a cage in a room and everything else is fluff, Wayne. What we try to do is make sure that fluff around it is second to none. And that's, you know, having upstairs where we're feeding everyone. I'd like to say our back of house is, I think, you know, up there with anyone. I think my wife does an amazing job. I have to say that because I'm going home tomorrow and she might, you know, stab me if she watches this. So.
And you make it almost like a family affair as well. What's the sort of narrative or the reasoning as to why? I mean, you've got your 2 daughters there, your wife, everyone. It's literally like a family affair when it comes to putting on this event. Why is that?
Because everyone there isn't just there to help, they're invested in the show. I've got 2 of my best mates do the walkout. Everyone that's involved at Demolition is either a mate, a family. It's all family and friends. Pretty much camera people to people on the door, to, you know, Chris Radville, who's a registered trainer that, you know, we've brought in. We're all friends, so they've all got my back. And I'd like to think anyone that fights on Demolition feels the difference, that people are there just to support myself and Lisa.
Yeah, and like I've been to a lot of shows, and how you treat the fighters out the back, the big bowl of lollies, like even just little dumb things like that actually go a long way. And look, if anyone hasn't been to a Demolition show, I would say it is one thing that you absolutely have to do. But I wanted to move on to the business side of it, the 2 professional fights you had. Actually, no, before I go, there's 2 little shout outs I also wanted to go. I wanted to get your thoughts on, we'll mention some of the other guys, and do check this card out, Demolition Fight Series, to see this. But your thoughts on Anthony Pascalis's power guillotine, and also the Alan Ewan split decision victory.
So we'll start with he was yelling Percy, Percy, because Percy from MMA FFT did exact same one, but I'll take you back to Demolition Fight Series 2. And Luke Daly landed that on an adrenaline fighter. So it's been around for a while. Sorry, Renato, you can call it Percy, but that's been around a while. That was, if you actually watch some of the YouTube, and what Renato did, they practiced that in the cage an hour before the show. So, yeah, look, Terrence didn't fight the hands, wrapped it up, and yeah, it was over pretty quickly. So shout out to Terrence, who had his 10th amateur fight, but Anthony Pascalis, that was elite. I'll move on to the flyweight. And I've said this before, they're two of the best flyweights in Australia, and that's Rory Daff versus Alan Nguyen. And I believe that they'll fight again, not straight away, but probably in the pros. There is also somebody waiting for Alan Nguyen that's been calling for that title shot. I won't actually name him, but he
Ah.
may be dropping down from bantamweight.
And I believe Alan Newman training out of Combat One, they are just leaps and bounds, man. Never again will I doubt Jono Mikulev.
He did do that. I will. I will. From somebody that hasn't done media for about 5 years, I did watch a little bit of that narrative, and knowing Jono and Sam and everyone well, I'm thinking, and Joey Luciano is an absolute beast. But that fight was always closer than some people in the media thought it was going to be.
I'll tell you what, I'm falling in love with the narrative of Australian MMA, but it's becoming a little more powerful than I thought. Like, often I'll say one thing that, like, I see and everyone else runs with it. And I'm starting to realize, I'm like, oh man, I'm like, in a way, like, if Channel 9 says something dumb, the guy at work says it to you the next day. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, I have to be a little bit more like articulate. Cause even that, it's not that Jono wasn't, ready, that he couldn't win that fight. It was the whole like, oh, was he ready to be next in line? Yada, yada. But I love that Jono held on to that for the whole time. And then when we finally got to do the interview, which, let me tell you what, standing in a change room with about 5 people, one of them is myself, the rest is Jono Mikulev's team, and I'm standing there with my microphone in hand, ready to try and get an interview, was one of the most intimidating things ever. But like, credit to both Sammy Hayward, his coach, and Jono Mikulev. They were like, of course, mate, let's chat.
Jono and Sam are gentlemen, mate. So you're more than safe in there. But you put your neck out, and you know what? That's pretty much why you're doing so well, is because you are saying what a lot of people won't say. But yeah, it's look, being in the media for a little while, it's a loveless position sometimes. So I don't envy you.
But look, you did it, and you were out there. Why did you step back from the Australian media a little bit?
I was flying, covering everybody else, spending time away from my family. And it was actually my wife. I woke up Christmas morning 2018, and she'd actually registered the business name Demolition Fight Series. So it's actually my wife that pushed me to do it. She said, you've probably got a bigger calling than doing media. I think that was her way of saying you shit, and you're probably a better organizer. So that's pretty much where it was born. So if anyone wants to, where did Demolition come from? Yes, it was my idea. Yes, I love the name. But I woke up Christmas morning and she'd had a T-shirt made up, and I thought, what's this? And opened the box, and there was a registered business name and things like that. So she's a massive part of the business. So.
Jeez, behind every great man. Now, your 2 pro fights,
Yes.
Pat Hill, Mal McDowell, and then of course Val Sharapov. Just we'll finish on Sharapov, but so I want to go through the other fight first, because I think that kid's going to be special. But the Pat Hill Mal McDowell fight, were you surprised with how that went?
I wouldn't say surprised. I always knew Pat Hill had that ability if he could take Mel down. Mel had worked on his defensive grappling, from what I could see, and he's always been a great grappler, and his hands had caught up. So I looked at Mel and thought, if Mel can keep it standing, I thought that he could win that way. If he had a path to victory, it was definitely by creating some space and letting his hands go. And I think that was the big differentiator between him and Pat. But Pat was always had the better grappling, and training under Duke Didier, you knew that was his path to victory. So Mel made a mistake. I thought he looked good early. His hands looked really good, landed a clean elbow. But once Pat got on top, Mel made a mistake and went for a triangle, and that opened it up. And Pat was slick and finished him, in the first.
Were
But
you?
again, a great fight. Mal will be better for that.
Yeah.
We had a great amateur career, 7-2, won a couple of those amateur belts that everyone talks about. Went pro. There you go. Pat Hill hadn't fought for us, but I've got a great relationship with Duke Didier. So we've been trying to get Pat on for a little while. So it was great to have both of their pro debut. We're pretty proud of that fight.
And were you aware that Pat Hill fell off a roof?
In the cage I was when Duke Didier told me. And I said, I'm glad you didn't tell me because you invest. Don't worry about, what, we can all make more money. It is what it
Yeah.
is. But the time that we put into these shows to have, fights fall over and as you know, the amount of people pulling out of fights at the moment, it's hard. And I do feel for everybody
Mm.
because we put so much effort into it, so much time, blood, sweat, and tears. And then it's not their fault because they have to work so hard. The human body, sometimes things happen and collisions happen. But him falling off a roof wasn't ideal. And I'm glad he didn't tell me.
Look, I just think that's what makes Andy Carpenter, your MC, who's, I mean, in himself, he's got a great career of chasing down pedos as a lawyer, which I think is amazing. But him as your MC, like that's what makes the demo show so great, is all the little characters in between. And when Andy Carpenter mentioned that Pat Hill fell off a roof a couple of days before, I mean, that's just a great narrative of a guy picking up a victory.
Yeah, shout out to Andy, not just an MC, but a dear friend of mine, a lot of help. And he is the most hated person by all the pedophiles in Australia, which I don't know if he'd love that catchphrase, but Andy does a lot of work for us behind the scenes as well. And again, you said it's a family show or it's friends. Andy, I count as a really good friend of mine. So.
And the final fight of the night, Darcy Ballhouse versus Val Sharapov. Sharapov he's going to be special.
Yep, he had a couple of amateur fights on Demolition, and then obviously went out and went to a lot of different promotions, but always wanted to get him back. He was 2-0. Darcy Ballhouse is a lot heavier than Val. Val is a featherweight, stepped up to lightweight to face Darcy. Darcy was 1-3, and people look at that and think, oh, okay, but you got to remember his first two fights were before COVID, and he was only a kid. So I really looked at him and thought, okay, he's probably 1-1, and he just lost to Luke Daly, who is a fantastic fighter. So on paper, a lot of people thought this was a lot wider than what I believed. And if you watch the first minute, Darcy is doing really, really well. And Val has to, calm himself, get out of a submission himself, and then does what he needed to do. But I don't think a lot of people expected Darcy to come out and take his back like that.
And in terms of the future shows, I mean, what is the goal still? I mean, do you want to have, 10 pro fights, or do you want to stick to this sort of template that you've got going?
I'd like to develop the amateurs. I believe that there is a hole and there is a gap. Do I want to do all pro? No. Could I? I've said this in a previous interview. If I wanted to go full pro, I could, but I don't want to. I've got a career outside of my hobby of promoting MMA, and that's probably what makes me different to a lot of people. Is I truly do this not for anything else than I love the sport. It is a hobby. It's not about money, and a lot of promoters will say that, but I think I've lived it over the first 12 shows. But yeah, I'd like to do 2 or 3 pro fights and then 10 or 11 amateurs and do exactly what I'm doing. Because what I want to do is look back in 10 years' time and look back on Demolition 11 and Demolition 10 and see Jacob Lepage, his first, 6 fights were with us, and now he's gone pro and he's an Australian champion or he's overseas. I think the Demolition, if you go back on Tapology and have a look at the fighters' early days, what they're doing now, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to look back, look at some of these cards and go, gee, that aged well. And if you look back at, Demolition 7 and you've got Abdallah Biata, who everyone forgets, Abdallah's my feather and lightweight pro champion. A lot of people forget that. So everyone thinks, oh, yeah, it's only an amateur show. When I want to do a pro fight, I will. And if I wanted to do more pro, I could, but it's just not something that I believe Australian MMA needs. We've got pro shows, we've got everything. I think there's a gap with Pro-Am, and I think my little niche at Club Italia, the loudest venue in Australia, it feels like when you're in there, it suits my family.
And then before I let you go, I would have to stir the pot just a little bit. Why are you going head to head with Hex in March?
That wasn't deliberate. I only found out probably the week before this show. So I booked that date last year.
Yeah.
Hang on, my internet is
Oh,
disabled.
is it?
Ask that
Oh, is it?
question
Is it
again,
now?
No, it just went unstable. Yeah, go for it. Ask again because I will answer it because I think people need to know.
Why are you going head to head with Hex having the same date in March next year?
I only found that out last week. So that was just before my fight. And one of the gyms said, "Hey, do you know your date in March is the same date as Hex?" And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." I booked it a very long time ago, and I book my venue a year out. Obviously, with all my other commitments, working full time, my wife working full time, dealing with that venue, we have to be really organised. So I've actually got my 4 dates planned and locked in 12 months ahead. I could give you my schedule right now and tell you exactly what it is. Do I think it's going to matter? I don't think so. We've got different. They're doing all pro. We're doing amateur and pro. Do I think it'll affect us? Not really. We've always done Saturday nights, and look, all power to them. If they want to do it on a Saturday night, March 2nd, doesn't matter to me.
Is there any chance of any of you guys, have you communicated on like if any of the dates can be moved forward or back?
No, I haven't. Communicated with Hex. I'm doing what I'm doing. They can do what they do. I'll be honest with you. I don't actually watch what other people are doing and looking at dates and things like that. Obviously, I'm interested in watching, fights and things like that. But what they're doing with their dates and things like that, I lock mine in, and I don't think I'm going to reach out to people and say, "Hey, move your date." I don't think Demolition Fight Series can ask other people to move their date, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to ask me to move mine. But it is what it is, and I can't move my date. So you know what? People can go go early to then and come and catch my fights. And you know what? There's enough MMA fans in Australia, in Victoria. I'm sure both of us will sell out.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great weekend. I'll be at Hex. I'll send Joel to you from Fight News.
Well, he did cover Demolition Fight Series. Let's stir that pot.
Well, that's what I love. My favorite, it was like the unofficial fight weekend. For people that don't know, the Hex was always on the Friday and Demolition was on the Saturday. And it was the best like fight weekend for me to come on over.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it used to be Friday and Saturday. I didn't move my day.
Now, mate, before I do let you go, I want to kind of ask you a question for two entities. After it's all said and done, how does Wayne Carl want to be remembered in mixed martial arts? And how does Demolition Fight Series want to be remembered?
I actually don't care how I'm remembered. It's not about me. And I'm being honest about that. I want them to remember Demolition Fight Series as people that created a space for amateurs to make their debut, decide whether they're going to go pro. That's what I want to be remembered. I actually don't like that whole what I want to be remembered. I actually don't care if people don't even know my name. I'd rather walk down the street and see someone in a Demolition Fight Series top say hello and they don't even know who I am. That means I'm doing my job.
I got it. So right here, the Demolition Fight Series shirt. It's a little bit too small because I'm a little bit too big.
Well, fly past. If you're going to Hex on that night, if they finish early, maybe you could zoom past and catch my main event, and I'll charge you $35 for another one.
No, I'm going to wear it, walk in like I'm staff.
In saying that, I charge everyone else 20, and I'd probably give Joel from Fight News Australia one.
Yeah. Well, he's actually doing really well. I'm actually a big fan. I've give him a lot of shit. Seeing him and the amount of bullying I've done for him over the last couple of months has I've encouraged him. I like it.
Yeah, it's all good.
Mate, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it and all your help and of course everything you've done for Australian MMA so far. This will be the first chat of many. But thank you so much and I'll see you next time.
See you, mate. Thank you.